Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Gruba.
and today we're going to be doing something a little different. And if you are viewing this right now on YouTube and if you've not seen the article yet, please take a look in the links and follow along in the article. Yeah, we are starting a series today. Whenever you're watching this, that's today, right?
It's what they've
Placing
been
this.
waiting for, Sean. You're finally doing it.
I've opened up my brain. And what we're going to do today, and we're going to start up, now is a weekly series called Paper to Pixel to Paper Again. And many years ago, I wrote about some of the tech processes that I've gone through to work on getting basically the best reproduction possible of different kinds of artwork. And I have recently revised these and are hoping to supplement each one of these installments with videos that explain some of the key points or demonstrate some of the things that were previously described or things along those lines. And the goal with this is to basically give you a one-stop place for anything related to reproduction for print. So anybody who has a question about that, my goal is that this is essentially going to be the place that you can go to get any of the information, no matter how detailed that you want about reproduction. And to kick off this series, I thought that Carson and I could just talk a little bit about why reproduction matters. And specifically, because the series is starting here discussing line art, why reproduction for line art matters. For me, my first experiences with having a really visceral effect of line were really, really young. I had formative experiences. I would say I was in a kindergartner when I made my first line drawings, and I got that visceral thrill of seeing that mark etched into the playground dirt, or seeing the paintbrush line and making this dark black line right across the paper and just cutting the paper in half, like bisecting the paper with this big dark line, and getting this sort of visceral thrill from it. Years and years later, reading about cave paintings and things like that, realizing that we essentially as human beings have this sort of direct connection to line that is a very kind of primal thing. And reproducing that line, we live in an age of reproduction. We live in an age where visual material is available to us at all times. And basically, even though reproduction technologies have improved, you wouldn't know it from looking at a lot of things. Things look a lot worse than they used to. And you might not believe me if you haven't gone to the library and like checked out their original printings of like a Gustave Doré illustrated book or something like that, and really had that visceral experience of saying, oh my gosh, look at this detail. Like having this I say visceral experience because when you look at something that has been rendered in a certain kind of way and it's like vibrating on the page, each of these lines like its own sort of raised ink surface that you can almost like have a tactile relationship with. That is not something that you typically get these days from books. We're going to talk specifics in a minute here, but that was my sort of general mission. Like, what is it that's happened that's kept, while color reproduction gets better and better and better and better, why is it that people were able to print lines significantly better than they were now? What's actually holding it up? Carson, I don't know what your experience is with these particular, issues, or if you have.
I mean, obviously, I grew up wanting to do comics, and that just kind of biased me towards line, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I do find as an instructor that the majority of my students are come in line biased anyways. So I do think that is a basic function of the human visual perception system, not just the eyes, but the coordination with the brain. And I'm still trying to coordinate between two different neuro-ophthalmologists, one at University of Alabama and one at University of Alabama, Birmingham. And one of them is specifically dealing with motion and stuff. So he might be able to speak to the actual biological nature of that. That's what I'm hoping. We'll get like a neuro neurobiological explanation for this preference for line, and you've
Yeah.
speculated that. But I do see it in my students, a huge preference for what I call edge detection is where I think line comes from. But yeah, do I remember having a visceral experience as a kid or anything? No, I just remember wanting to draw the Ninja Turtles, and like lines was what you used to do it. In terms of reproduction, and I would say people who are wanting an example of this, why this matters. We have a number of videos that we've done now, looking at like Akira or Berserk or any of the analyses that we've done where we've scanned stuff and are showing close-ups of the degradation of the line. And then B, go get Strange Death of Alex Raymond. That's part of the story of that book, and that's where I became most aware of reproduction issues, was reading the original Strange Death of Alex Raymond material in Glamour Puss, where Dave is showing like, here's what it looks like in the current IDW reprint. Now they have oftentimes they're not given the best materials to work with, so it's not their fault, but showing how these things reproduced, and then him either speculating what the original looked like, or having now, because of heritage auction or whatever, you can get images of these things online and see what the original looked like, and recuperate that drawing. And for me to see those two things next to each other was extremely impactful, because I had written off Alex Raymond. Like, I'd seen his work, but I thought, well, this stuff looks like shit. It's these big, clumsy, clunky lines. I wasn't seeing his actual artwork. Like, we're going to talk about the Puma Blues. And I can't fucking look at that book. I think like Michael Zulli is a clunky, clumsy artist. I don't know though, because it's a terrible reproduction. So maybe that artwork looks beautiful, but to my eyes, it looks like bad art just because it's bad reproduction. So that was illuminating to me. And then through working with you and seeing what you did with the Cerebus reprints and seeing what you've done with my art, then now I can't look at so many, like my eyes are ruined. Like books look crappy to me. Like I probably would have loved Puma Blues 3-4 years ago, but now I can't even barely look at it. So that was my initial hope for this channel, is like we could do a lot of those videos where we're like, look at this print version versus this print version, or here's an original versus what's been printed, and that you could explain why. And I think a lot of the subs came to this channel because of your kayfabe thing. So I'm excited we're getting this going. But it's really working with you that has attuned my eyes to this stuff. I just didn't know how many artists are being poorly represented, and I think it's a shame. And I'm surprised that more artists haven't fought to get their stuff. Like I'm surprised more people aren't like, what did you do to my art? So take this, now this series of videos will be out there and you can take control of your own art, hopefully all the way up through the printing process, where you'll know what to like pester, because Sean's real good about like, he'll pester the printer and he'll be like, you got to do this. And that's why Strange Death of Alex Raymond and the Cerebus reprints look so good, is Sean's involved in every step of the process.
Yeah, and I should say this caveat is in the first article, which, like I said, you should read. Take a look at it now, because that's where all the bulk of the information is. This caveat is in the first article, but if you're just getting started with this and you're at the beginning stages of cartooning, you really don't need to don't dive into this. Like, this is not for you. If you're at the beginning stages of your stuff, get paper and fold a piece of paper in half, get a legal size 8.5 by 14 and fold it in half, and draw on that, and then use a photocopier, because if you have a well set up photocopier, it's going to look better than spending hours and hours and hours learning these things and then printing it out. What you need at this point is probably making more pages, not learning a bunch of technical information.
Or put it on Instagram. Like I tell that to my students all the time. The best thing you can do right away is get it in public, and declare publicly some kind of frequency with which you're going to do the thing. So you've made yourself accountable to the public. I find that's a massive benefit. Make yourself accountable in some way to keep going on whatever it is that you want to get done. Yeah, for
Right.
sure. Don't get caught up in the weeds of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. That being said, if you're already in the weeds or you're looking to solve a problem, hopefully this is where it's going to help you out. I also want to say we are making this as part of our Patreon. Support is what's making this possible. If you have enjoyed this series or this is useful to you, please do become a member of our Patreon. Or if you only want to make a one-time donation, we'll have a PayPal link in the bottom here and of the video and also in the article. This is really, every time we do this, it does cut into both of our work times. And this is something that we can put together because people are supporting us and are following along. So we really do appreciate that support. As far as why it matters and why some of these things are generally not known, it's a weird thing how knowledge goes away. You and I have talked about a few times how when the digital switchover happened in printing, it sunk a lot of printers because all these printers had hundreds of thousands of dollars in various types of things like plate setters and stuff that all of a sudden were totally obsolete. If you are producing a printing plate from a photomechanical process, all of the gear that you used is now done, needs to go to a landfill. It's totally not resaleable or anything. And so depending on when people bought that stuff, all of a sudden, if the demand from a client is, hey, I want to give you these files and you're going to make a printing plate from these files, that required a completely different set of equipment. And so a lot of printers got left behind. And what else also happened, there was a tremendous brain drain in the industry at that same time as the margins got tighter and, paper got more expensive and that's continued to rise. What a lot of these printers did in response to that was laid off the specialists who had worked on the line before that. So all these people who were specialists in photography, all these people who knew how to take really good photo negatives or knew how to develop the plates in a really good way or understood, press densities and things like that. All those people got pushed out of the industry and they basically hired new people who would work for lower amounts of money and had less base knowledge and relied more and more on the sort of, what's filtered down to them from the printer or from the companies that are supplying the software and everything like that.
In a timeline, like when was this happening in the industry? Like what range of years do you know?
It depends on where you were, but somewhere between 1994 and 2002, 2005. I mean, as far as printers that were still making things from photo negatives, I think the last ones probably stopped around 2005, maybe 2006. And so, we're talking about like a 10-year range. And where you were and how much business there was and what the size of your shop were really the determining factors. But basically this brain drain accompanied that. All these people who had been there for decades and decades and decades and had learned all these different tricks are gradually being replaced by, different levels of automated software and, essentially instructions from people. And what that leads to is it leads to things like this. I'm going to call out a direct book here. This is a book, Bad Island by Stanley Donwood. This was sent to me by a friend, and this is put out by Penguin Press. This is a book of line art put out by Penguin Press. The entire thing is halftoned.
Oh, okay.
So this entire book, even though the artwork was created with these woodcut look to it, a very thick woodcut look, the entire thing has been processed through what's called a screening process. And you'll read in detail about this on the second installment of this series. But what it basically boils down to is even though this is very, very chunky kind of work, when I'm reading this, here's a page from this that uses a bunch of parallel turning lines. This page is basically a demonstration of why you don't halftone line work, because when you're looking at it in person, rather than get this sort of vibratory power from these turning lines that are moving in parallel motion with each other, you get this weird sort of thing where the line seems to get fuzzier and fuzzier as it approaches the curve. Because instead of this being made up of basically like a off or on image, where the off is black and the on is white. Instead, all of those edges are feathered with these tiny little dots that are supposedly not visible to your eye.
I'm gonna
But they
pull
are
up a
very
halftone. Here's a halftone of a photograph, and it's made all out of dots, basically.
right.
Just so people who have, I mean, I know we've talked about halftone in a number of our other videos, but if they haven't seen that, just so they could see what you're talking about when you're talking about halftone.
And so the halftone process is used to give the illusion of what's called, misleadingly called, a continuous tone image. And so when you're looking at something in print that appears to have variations to gray or variations of color, what's actually made up of teeny tiny cells that are set up in an array. And, at a certain distance, that gives the effect of giving the illusion of grayscale. But the thing is, when you have line art, any line art at all, the idea is that you're reproducing that with just on and just off images. And basically, imagine the simplest kind of print. You take like a surface of a potato or something, and you cut away all the parts that you don't want to be printed, and you just leave a raised surface that has the image that you want. You take it and you stamp it in ink, and then you place it onto the thing. That, in essence, is what line art reproduction is in the crudest kind of fashion. You're taking a printing plate of some type where there's a variation of the different types of processes and such, and are essentially making an image using the raised or lowered surfaces of the plate. And that can give you, with modern technology and the right kind of know-how, essentially a perfect reproduction, believe it or not, a perfect reproduction of a line art image. And if you don't do that, if you do something else instead, God knows how this got through Penguin. I say that, but because Penguin is one of the biggest publishers in the world, you would think that this would be an oddity, that they just happened to have made poor Stanley Donwood's book look like this. Stanley Donwood, by the way, bigger name than virtually every cartoonist working in North America right now. This is the gentleman who's responsible for the artwork of the different Radiohead albums and things like that. Basically, every Radiohead album since OK Computer has had artwork and artwork books put together by Stanley Donwood, and yet his stuff is still fouled up. But it's no surprise if you've looked through the Penguin Classics, they've put out these like deluxe hardbacks of different editions of, for instance, Alice in Wonderland and things like that. And you're looking at the line art through like a screen the entire time. All those little lines that were carefully, engraved by John Tenniel are turned into like these random little dots for no particular reason other than the fact that they don't have anybody who works there who knows about it. I mean, I really don't know another reason.
Well, and I think the other thing is when you're talking about this brain drain that happened, you're taking away people who weren't necessarily artists, but they were artisans.
Yes.
Right? Craftspeople, and they know how to look at things in a physical, like the physicality, their visual system is attuned to the physicality of things in the same way that the artist is. When you switch over to everyone working on a computer, it's a bunch of graphic designers who are used to seeing things on screen, and they're used to everything being run through a pixel system, and that halftone probably look fine on the screen. And those guys maybe aren't even going down and seeing the final finished product. So there becomes a disconnect, I would assume, between and it's like a really intimate, tactile relationship that your eyes build as an artist with the surface of something. And if you're always not, and I'm not shitting on graphic designers at all, but a lot of your job is mostly managed through a screen now.
Right.
And if they're not back dealing, and they haven't developed the eye brain coordination to see the physicality of this stuff, like they don't even know it was a bad decision. It still looks good to them. They just haven't developed the ability to see it.
Right. And like you said, there's several steps removed from it.
Yeah.
You know, when all the pre-press was done at the plant that it's going to be printed at, I mean, that guy's on the line. You know, the guy who shot the negative could literally just step out from his office and go see how it looks on the line. You have real-time feedback, and Adobe has some things to blame for this. We're going to talk about this in particular installments later, but in lots of the Adobe products, making something into a line art image, a 1-bit line art image, makes it look worse.
Yeah.
I mean, Adobe has set up their system so that doing something properly oftentimes displays worse on the screen, which is a shocking thing.
But it
Virtually,
would print well, is what you're suggesting.
yes.
So it's like scary because you see it look crap on the screen. And I've seen what you're talking about. I switch my stuff over to the 1-bit, like you would say, and I'm like, oh, like this looks terrible. So I could see why people would be like, don't do that if they've never printed it out and experienced it.
Right. Or if they don't know, I'm just gonna pick this up here.
Oh, that's a beautiful whatever. It's falling apart, but it's beautiful.
This is I'd like to thank my friend Steve Swenson for sending this to me, by the way. This is La Fontaine, which is a French book illustrated by Doré. And
Ooh.
it is just unbelievably fantastic reproduction. You know, got this gold gilt edge
Yeah.
to it. And these were made, you guys, you know, if you're familiar with Gustave Doré, he, you know, worked in an age where he did not have the free pen that would one day come. His lines, he would make an illustration directly on the boxwood that it would be printed on, and then someone would take it away from him and etch it, or wood engrave it, depending on whether it was an etching or an engraving. And these things are stunning images, absolutely stunning images of, you know, it gives you the appearance on the screen anyway of being toned. You look at this gray tone that comes through and all these different areas of tone. All those things are built up with these very, very fine lines, basically finer than you would almost ever see in a modern print, which is just shocking to me. I mean, so this book was produced in like 1889 or 1888 or something. And yet it puts any modern reproductions to shame.
Just so people if people haven't seen Doré, just so they can see. Again, these are not the greatest images on screen, but
you get an idea of, you know, the way that they've been produced anyway, and the cumulative buildup. And so all this was done with boxwood, and basically, you know, he would make his basic design into the image or on the surface of the wood, and then somebody would cut away the parts that were going to be, you know, represented the cut into the white areas. Anyway, not to go into that, but this was my other adult experience of having that almost like a spiritual experience with artwork, was picking up a copy of Milton's Paradise Lost that Doré had done illustrations for. I got to see this at the Seattle Library. I used to live in Seattle, and checked out a copy. I mean, they wouldn't let me check it out, but I got to pull it off of the rare book section and just like spend a couple hours with it. And all of the parallel hatching that's in this gives it this special vibratory power. If you guys are familiar with like Jim Woodring, you know, he's taken that to sort of an extreme, but basically parallel hatching that follows, you know, each of the hatching lines are roughly parallel to each other. It gives it this sort of vibratory quality to it and gives it a surface. It almost looks like the image is rising up towards you when you're looking at it.
Well, and if the ink is printed on thick enough and dark enough, it is, you can almost feel it, like you can see it raise off the paper. So
right,
it isn't just that there's an illusion. It's a really nice print, especially an old print, because it's a stamp. Like if it's nice, thick, sticky, dark ink, like it is raised.
Anyway, so I mean, I hope that this gives a little bit of a background to why we anyway think this matters, why Carson and I think this matter, and why I thought it was worthwhile to invest the, I mean, dozens, hundreds of hours we're going to put into putting these videos up for you, putting these articles up for you. Like I said, the article is the primary thing. I went back and forth about what the most important, what the best way to do this was. And it seemed to me that an article allows you to take it at its own speed. You don't have to write down things. You don't have to pause it. I got a lot of feedback from the interview that I did with Jim on kayfabe that people were pausing it and writing stuff down and stuff like that. And, that sort of fire hose approach can be useful if it's just the one exposure. But I think that this is going to be something that people can really take their time with and savor. And hopefully we can have an interactive aspect to it. So if you're watching this now and you have not read the article, please like, subscribe, become a patron. Go check out this article and then hit me up with any questions that you have in the comments. And the goal is that I'm going to build this series out week by week, and I'm going to address your questions in the further installments. So the purpose of doing this, as we go, rather than just doing the whole thing at the same time, besides the fact that I just don't have time to do that, is the fact that hopefully we can build up some momentum. I can get an idea of what types of questions people are actually looking for. And the goal is that this topic will be as dead as a doornail by the time we are done. That by the time we are done, you are going to know everything you will ever want to know about reproduction. That whether that is line art, whether that is color, whether that is line art and color together. Okay, you can do these things.
And
this
and
can be
restoration, right? Like a lot of your
Absolutely.
stuff is restoration that you've dealt with.
Mm-hmm. And different ways to deal with different types of materials. I mean, basically it's the first draft of all this is written, and it's what did you tell me before, Carson? 45,000 words.
I don't remember how many words. I printed it out for students at some point, and I think it was like about a 250 page document. Yeah.
I think it was 45,000 words or 50,000 words, which is like a novelette, like a 250 page novel, like you said.
Yeah.
And it's going to be expanded from that, especially expanding the color sections and things like that. I've gotten a lot better handle on, things like color conversion from different color spaces and things like that. But I would really appreciate feedback. And once again, would really appreciate your patronage if you were able to support this endeavor. Is there anything else you want to say on our maiden launch here, Carson?
No, I would just say in terms of the patronage, it's not just like buying you the time to make the content because you're a freelancer, but also you've spent how many years building this knowledge,
Too many.
Yeah, so it's like I always think people miss out on that part of artists and just experts in their areas. They tend to think about we're paying them for the job at the time, and not necessarily thinking about the hour. It's like, well, I'm paying you for an hour, and it's like, well, no, I mean, there's also like 20 years of experience behind this hand. So yeah, it's a show of appreciation also for the research that you've done,
well, thanks.
just to do it.
I should say that the only reason, as far as I can tell, that I became an expert at this is the fact that Dave Sim, who I worked with on the Cerebus restoration project, had the patrons who paid him to be able to just basically say, you go forth. I mean, Dave really did 2000. I can't even remember if it was the end of 2013 or the end of 2014 now. But whenever it was when I started on this, he really did just say, you take your time. You do this until you figured it out. And it was really something else. Like I spent weeks on these things, and you talk about real-time feedback. I mean, we did press tests with lots of different printers. I went back and forth over all these different sheets. I have a stack of these press sheets over here to the right of me. I can see right now when
we'll
we're
have
talking.
To scan some of those and show those too, like your experimental phase. I think that would be instructive to people. Like, look, this is what I printed out. This is what it looked like on screen. These are the 5 tests I did. Like, I think that will all be cool stuff to show.
We'll definitely do that. And it was very interesting to have those initial discussions with the printers, and just some of them being like, no, we're not going to do that. Or, gradually realizing who I wanted to work with and how I wanted to be treated when I was, making requests. But it's been a crazy almost decade. And I am really looking forward to just sort of putting all of this knowledge out there and, hoping that people really get some benefit out of it. And then it's interesting to them. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy the first 2 installments.
Yeah, thanks, and we're looking forward to benefiting from your decade of hand wringing and sweating.
Yeah, I could tell you my hairline has changed.
I don't know, it's pretty lush still. I'm a little jealous.
Here, let me see if I can. You see this?
Yeah, but you see how gray? Like, you're still so nice and dark and curly.
It's the dark hair. It really helps.
Yeah. All
Hide,
right,
hide all
guys.
those imperfections. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for
Bye.
listening. Take care.